Hello and welcome to the readings from Lancashire Life for February. Your readers today are Wendy, Kathryn and me, Rick. And February being the month of St Valentine's Day, there's a special feature in this month's edition when the editors asked various people to write love letters to Lancashire. This first one is by Chris Cypress, the well-known northern artist. There's something truly special about the people of Lancashire. They have a strong sense of identity, warm, open, straightforward, and a pride in their heritage that's impossible not to admire. It's one of the reasons I've always felt at home here. When I moved to Lancashire in the late 70s, the landscapes, the architecture, and the close-knit, friendly communities all became part of my story. They shaped the way I saw the world, long before I knew I'd one day make a living painting it. My studio at Wood End Mill on the River Tame is based in the old cotton mill I used to pass every morning on my walk to school. Even as a boy I was drawn to it. Standing like a monument to the town's textile past, it always seemed as though the whole community worked within its walls. Lancashire's rugged, open landscapes have been at the heart of my artistic inspiration throughout my 20-year career. After spending my early childhood in the suburbs of Manchester, arriving here felt like stepping into an entirely new chapter. New friends, new places to explore, exciting countryside to get lost in. I've travelled to many corners of the UK, but I've yet to find anywhere that matches the Pennine Hills. Flat land just doesn't stir me in the same way. Wherever I go, I find myself longing for Lancashire's rolling hills and scenery. And yes, we see more than our fair share of rain, but when the sun breaks through over those hills, there's simply no better sight. In winter, the magic intensifies. A dusting of snow transforms the landscape completely. Some of my most treasured paintings are winter scenes, sharp sunlight, blue shadows, crisp air, and that soft blanket of snow that makes everything feel peaceful and new. The distinctive gritty character of Lancashire's towns inspired one of my most ambitious art projects, Northern Lights. I am fascinated by the atmosphere at dusk when traditional sodium lights begin to glow. Cobbled alleys, terrace rows, solitary streets, all these seemingly ordinary spaces become strangely captivating in that mix of light and shadow. I continue to study the county's ever-shifting scenery using an intense colour palette to bring a little extra vibrancy to the familiar places I see on my walks every day. Lancashire is where I found my footing as an artist, where I learned to appreciate the beauty in the natural world, and where I settled into the life I love. I'm proud to call it home. And the next contribution to the Lancashire Love Letters is in the form of a poem by Kerry Cunningham, who is a writer and illustrator. Underneath the grey and cloudy skies, a landscape lies below. Bare branches stretch towards the heavens, the hills dusted with snow. The winter can seem bleak here, the bitter wind bites at your fingers, but no matter what the weather, the warmth of the people lingers. And sun will break through slowly, the promised spring is dawning, the mist clears from the fields to reveal a brand new morning. The people, like the landscape, are solid, they stand strong. They join and face together what each season brings along. Communities and families, people look out for each other, their northern charm and character unmatched by any other. The beauty of our county, of its people, seems to shine, a place that has my heart, and I am proud to call it mine. From the views atop of Rivington to the sand of Morecambe Beach, Lush green trails and shorelines both lie within our reach. Endless nature to explore where an adventurer can roam. I feel so lucky to live here and to call Lancashire my home.
The next contributor is Hetty Byrne. She is Sustainable Tourism Officer for the Forest of Bowland National Landscape. I count myself lucky every day to live and work in one of Lancashire's most beautiful corners, the Forest of Bowland. It isn't just a pretty backdrop, it's alive with character, rolling hills spilling into wildflower meadows, and villages brimming with history and community spirit. The best part? Nature is on my doorstep. I can step outside, breathe fresh air and wander through woodlands or across open moorland whenever I get the chance. And that feels like such a privilege. Then there's the wildlife. Out walking, if I'm lucky, I get to glimpse the secretive creatures that call Bowland home. Those rare moments stop me in my tracks. They inspire me, shape my work and keep me grounded. I grew up in Clitheroe. I moved away for a while, but Bowland kept calling me back. This little patch of Lancashire isn't just where I live now, it's home. Proper home. It's woven into memories of family picnics in the Trough of Bowland, swimming in the River Hodder and midsummer hikes up Pendle Hill. Now it's where I'm nurturing my own family, creating new traditions and sharing the same sense of belonging that shaped my childhood. And then there's the food and crafts, things that make Lancashire distinctive. Nothing beats cutting into a wedge of crumbly Lancashire cheese, knowing it's made just a few miles away. When I need a gift, I choose something crafted by local hands, a wildlife print or pottery inspired by the landscape. Honestly, there's nowhere quite like it. Lancashire has this rare mix of stunning scenery, rich culture and warm, welcoming people. It's the kind of place that makes you slow down, breathe deeply and feel like you truly belong. And that's why I love it. We now have Vicky Harris, who is Marketing and Partnership Director for Visit Lancashire. It's the morning mist on the moors, or the rain clouds and sunshine rolling round the hills. It's looking up and just seeing trees and sky, not skyscrapers. It's sunsets on the coast, star-studded ink black dark skies in the Forest of Bowland. It's excitedly saying, I can see the sea, even if you're the only person in the car. It's following your nose to the nearest fish and chip shop after a beach walk in St Anne's. It's holding your breath at the top of the big one because you know that any second now you'll be screaming as you hurtle round the tracks. It's the thrill of the two pences teetering over the edge, the call of the number on the bingo hall, and the gusto you put into trying to win the donkey derby, regardless if you're 7 or 70. It's a steaming bowl of French onion soup from the Cartford Inn, or an authentic Italian hot chocolate in Lacanda. It's a Sunday roast from the Three Fishers, or a day spent learning to cook like a pro at Northcote. It's posing with Eric Morecambe, recreating his stance, or taking a seat next to Wallace and Gromit whilst Feathers McGraw watches on. It's the hypnotic twirling and whirling as the Wurlitzer plays in the Tower Ballroom, whilst couples dance round and round on the sprung floor. It's the match day where locals come out in their droves, going to the match like a Lowry painting and supporting their team passionately. It's the deafening clanking and cacophony of the steam-powered looms of Queen Street Mill and the climb up the steps at the top of Pendle Hill. It's the pint in the pub that awaits you once you've traversed back down. It's the legends of witches and folklore that inhabit the hills, the inventors of the past that brought forth the Industrial Revolution, and the pioneers of the now that put us at the forefront of the next revolution. It's the people, the friendliness, their warmth and the burr in their accents. But most importantly of all, it's home.
And the last two love letters are Tom Burdett, who's the CEO of the Wildlife Trust for Lancashire, Manchester and North Merseyside. I moved to Lancashire from the West Country 15 years ago, mainly for family reasons, but also for work. I have always felt incredibly welcomed here, have never been treated like an outsider. My family moved around a lot when I was a kid, so I've always had a desire to belong somewhere, and I feel like I have finally found it here. I love the people, the culture, the musical heritage, the landscape, the coast. Morecambe Bay is special to me. I feel huge peace every time I see the glorious sunsets over its shimmering mud, sands and creeks, experience the murmurations of starlings or wading birds, or hear the sounds of curlews and oyster catchers. I'm proud to be at the helm of the Lancashire Wildlife Trust, a charity whose work, people and mission people seem to respect everywhere I go. Unlike some neighbouring counties, which, let's be honest, can bang on a bit about how wonderful they are, I feel like Lancashire is more unshowy, a bit more modest, and so, as a result, you have to slowly discover its secrets yourself, and that makes it more special somehow. I've mentioned Morecambe Bay already, but I also love Bowland, the Lune Valley, Rivington, Darwin Moor, Wigan Flashes, Parbold Hill. The best beer I've ever tasted is brewed right here. There's nothing quite like sitting outside at a place like Rivington Brewery or Old School Brewery at Wharton, with a good pint, street food from a van, chatting with friends and listening to music as the sunlight slowly fades. Ideally, I'd be making the music with my brass band or umpire band. And the last one is from Ollie Martin, Chef Director of Avon Restaurant. As a proud chef and resident of the Red Rose County, I couldn't be happier to call Lancashire my home. From its stunning coastline and charming towns and villages to the rugged hills and valleys of the Ribble and the vast forests of Bowland, this county is a true testament to natural beauty. My daily commute takes me from the refreshing salt air of the estuaries, through sprawling green fields and rich farmlands, to a culturally vibrant city, all in under 30 minutes. This unique blend of convenience and beauty is a luxury that few counties in the UK can compete with. Lancashire is the home of the hot pot and butter pie, and nothing sums the people up better than that. The warm, comforting, hospitable hug of flavours that celebrate northern spirit. Living in Lancashire has not only shaped my lifestyle, but has also defined my career. It's given me a sense of purpose, meaning and a path to follow. Surrounded by passionate, creative and knowledgeable individuals, I'm constantly inspired to improve and in turn help others discover their own journeys. Here's to Lancashire, a place that fosters creativity, community and culinary excellence.
Moving on now from the love letters to something rather larger, a book, which is being written by travel writer Chris Moss on his return to Lancashire after almost 4 decades away. The story is entitled From Patagonia to Pendle Hill. The Lancashire Lads, The Leaving of Liverpool, Blow the Candle Out. The folk songbook is full of lyrics about going away, including from this county, to find work, to fight in wars, to seek fortune. But what about coming home? In 2021, I came back to live in Lancashire after a hiatus of almost 4 decades. I left for university in London, an ordinary enough move in 1984 as it is today. And then love, luck and destiny took me to Leeds, Buenos Aires for a decade, London again, South West Wales and Devon in that order. For most of the period, 37 years to be precise, I worked as a travel writer photographer and editor with many months in far-flung places, including Siberia, Patagonia, Kamchatka, Greenland, Tasmania, and many more besides. The decision to come back, if deep and even necessary, is not easy to explain. What brings us home? It wasn't family. As you get older, that unit tends to get smaller, and ties can thin down. It wasn't work. I was self-employed, footloose and freelance. It wasn't pure nostalgia. I knew full well how much Lancashire had changed, and how much I had changed too. The corner of the county where I was born and raised, the village of Burtonwood between St Helens and Warrington, with Liverpool and Manchester about 20 miles to the west and east, had seen pits and factories close, town centres hollowed out by retail parks, and other changes, for better and worse. I hedged my bets. I moved to Downham near Clitheroe. This way I could re-experience Lancashire, but from a very different angle. I live facing the north slope of Pendle Hill, and no, not because it blocks off the rest of the region, though there is definitely a cut-off quality to this end of Ribble Valley. Moving to the home county, but not to the village of my upbringing, means I'm always somewhat foreign here, which is ideal for a former globe-trotting travel writer. At first, Pennine, Lancashire was almost completely unknown to me. I knew some landmarks, especially Winter Hill. We could see the TV mast from Burtonwood. But people raised on the coal-mining, glass-making, foundry-firing West Lancs plain inhabit a different physical and mental universe to those who live amid cotton mill memories, dry stone walls and woolly sheep. The past 5 years have been an education. In fact, Winter Hill was one of my first homecoming experiences. In September 2021, the Bolton-based historian Paul Salverson invited me to join a commemorative hike for the 125th anniversary of the Great Trespass of 1896, when Bolton workers marched to demand access to the moortop. It was a clear, sunny day, and the atmosphere was riotously upbeat. As well as the fellowship and the powerful symbolism of the hike, the views from Rivington Pike across Lancashire are some of the finest in Britain. It helps to see your readopted home from on high. I could almost see St Helens, but not quite. The walk led to my making contact with the Pendle Radicals, a Gradley gang of ramblers and cultural historians who celebrate, in walks, talks, books and events, the original minds and socially conscious Lancashire legends who fought for all our rights, people like Selina Cooper of Barnoldswick, who worked in the mill as a 12-year-old and became a leading suffragette, and Thomas Arthur Leonard and Tom Stevenson, who fought for access rights and public footpaths. In fact, the new Two Toms walk from Whalley to the Pennine Way was devised in their honour. Pendle Hill is a focal point of the group, to which we also invite into our collective imaginary non-political historical figures, people like George Fox, founder of the Quakers, who had a peace-loving vision on the summit of the hill, the great Higham mathematician and astronomer Jonas Moore, and Nelson cricketing legend Leary Constantine. Lancashire, before, during and after the industrial era, has always given home to and attracted free thinkers, mavericks and modernisers. Why might that be? That was one of the questions I posed to myself when I decided to write a book about Lancashire. I say decided, but in some ways it was scrawled in the stars. On the very day I made the move from Devon to Downham, a publisher emailed me out of the blue to propose a book about the northwest of England. My fate was sealed. I approached the task as I did the homecoming, partly as travel writer, partly as returning native, and partly as budding historian. Once I started to explore the local history shelves at Clitheroe and Accrington libraries, it struck me how little I know about my county, and how hopeless my schools from age 5 to 25 had been at teaching us about where we came from and how our ancestors lived, worked, loved, and struggled. While I immersed myself in the Industrial Revolution years, when the life of Lancastrians was most dramatically altered, convulsed even, by changes in labour, housing, class and culture, I also wanted to scroll back to the rural and agricultural period, and forward to my own era, when music and film and the arts have come into their own as means of asserting identity and forging regional character. There are buried currents and visible connections between, say, textiles and modern fashion, between the legacy of the Pendle Witches and Jeanette Winterson's writing, see 2012's The Daylight Gate for dramatic proof, and between the stories from Halton Tower and the Shakespeare North Theatre in Prescott. Factory Records is a good example, a music label named after a very Lancashire workplace, as well as Warhol's factory in New York, located in the heart of Cottonopolis, with its iconic club, the Hacienda, beside the Rochdale Canal, flourishing when Manchester was going through trials and crises, now repackaged as a tourism trail and as a convenient peg to sell us all the brand of the original modern city, or, as detractors put it, Manhattan. Away from the desk, the past 5 years have taken me on drives and walks down memory lane, to Southport and Blackpool, which were family favourites, to Wigan and Leigh, the rugby rivals of St Helens, but also its natural brother and sister, cut from the same cloth, or coalface rather. I have spent many happy days flaneuring around Liverpool and Manchester. I did a master's degree in the former, and it's quite familiar ground, but I undertook long walks along the dockside, north and south, and crossed over to see Birkenhead and New Brighton. Manchester has less bracing views and more dubious weather, but the city is growing on me. Its pubs and restaurants are top class, and it still has great music, classical and popular. The Whitworth is probably my favourite UK art gallery, though I'm hoping the rebuilt Tate in Liverpool will be special too. I learned to birdwatch when I lived in Argentina. The pampas are sublime for waders and marsh birds, and have had joyful outings here to the Bowland Fells to see hen harrier, peregrine falcon, merling and ringousel, and to Martin Mere and several of the coastal RSPB reserves. The area where I live screams with owls and buzzards and is a relatively safe hideaway for peewits and curlews. Bramblings come every winter to perform murmurations, and we had starlings over this last one. Big herons patrol the rain-filled becks. A kestrel lives in one of our eaves. Garden birds like nuthatches, long-tailed tits and dunnocks, and green and spotted woodpeckers seem undaunted by the fierce westerlies. Lancashire has never seen itself as a nature and wildlife haven, certainly not compared with the lakes and Yorkshire Dales, but I'm hopeful for our green spaces. I like moorland environments, and given how many of us live in this densely populated county, more than 5 million, we have a loud voice to call for open-air spaces, access for all, and the right to breathe clean air. Lancashire is long overdue a re-evaluation, and not only by me. It's a century since the Industrial Revolution began to peter out. It's half a century since the administrative borders were redrawn and Liverpool and Manchester were politically dislocated from the towns whose people built them and worked in them. The changes witnessed and experienced by Lancastrians in recent times are, I would argue, almost as transformative as the great shift of peoples from rural to urban settings that took place between 1770 and 1850. Those who worked in cotton mills, mines and heavy industrial factories are now few, and the last ones are getting on. Those with memories of Lancashire as a predominantly industrial county are hovering around retirement age. We all need to work on creating new narratives, telling different stories, placing what we see, think and feel today in a broad, centuries-spanning context that explains it and nudges us onward. Slowly, season by season, Lancashire is becoming something other than my 40-year-old recollections and other people's preconceptions. I'm not sure I'm quite ready yet to set Edwin Moore's poem about coming home to the children and me, to music, to strum along to on my guitar. Coming home is never straightforward. Home itself is a slippery word, but I'm glad I've dipped a toe back in this old place. I'm still on holiday, a bit, every day, and I'm happy to keep it that way for a little while longer.
The next article is entitled Pearl Power, but Pearl being spelt P-U-R-L, because this introduces us to Lily Kate France, whose knits embody fashion, comfort and community. Spending an hour in the company of Lily Kate France is to take a tour at breakneck speed around such varied topics including crafts, modelling, astronomy, gardening and travelling. All anecdotes, of course, shared with the Lancashire native's witty, self-aware manner, which has endeared her to her social media followers. The 28-year-old is known on Instagram primarily for her knitting, but make no mistake, it's not just knitting her own pieces, which her almost 150,000 followers admire daily. Lily's skill is also the invention of patterns, which are snapped up by her mega fans on sites like Ravelry, an online community and website soft craft aficionados. In Lily's world, knitting is not a hobby reserved for grandmas and WI members. It's a starting point for personal style, which has given rise to the career of her dreams. Each piece which Lily uploads for sale, from the versatile Winnie sweater to the striking Take Turns tank, garners thousands of likes, and devotees falling over themselves to whip up their own version of the creations that are born at her home in Preston. Lily was turning her hand to knitting patterns, which sold for pocket money from the age of 13. My mum and my nan taught me the basics when I was about 8, and I liked it, she recalls. Back then, in the very early YouTube days, she had to make do with her mum's knitting technique. Knitting brought together a number of interests for Lily. When I was around 11 years old, I was super tall, about 5'6", and hadn't hit puberty, so was skinny, she explains. Ever practical, her solution was to make her own clothes. Dedication is a Lily trait, and knitting, a combination of both maths and art, was a winner. I consider myself a creative person, not in the way an artist creates a watercolour, more like architecture, where it is technical, but you're not just making 4 boring walls, she says. Lily is keen to point out it wasn't something considered cool back in 2009. I was designing whilst I was at school, but keeping it on the down low. My close friends knew about it, but other than that, I was living this completely separate life, where I would go to school and then do patterns in the evening. Designing patterns for sale dovetailed with another piece of luck when, at the age of 14, Lily took over a blog her mum had set up years earlier. Juggling knitting with 4 A-levels at college, writing what Lily had made into a travel lifestyle blog, she also shared her experiences of doing maths, physics, history and textiles A-levels. Through my blog, I was found by a PR company running a campaign for Engineering UK. It was all about getting more young people, particularly women and girls, interested in STEM subjects, STEM standing for Science, Technology, Engineering and Mathematics. Lily travelled to and from London, conducting interviews and visiting companies like Airbus. I look back and think, how did I manage it? 17-year-old me trotting around with all this equipment, setting up interviews and doing my homework on the train. As enjoyable as she found it, she felt a career in STEM wasn't exactly what she wanted. Also at that point, she decided she didn't want to go away to university. For the most part, education had got into the way of my opportunities. I was offered an internship in New York at Vogue Knitting when I was 15, and at the time wasn't able to take it as my school wouldn't authorise it, she explains. The experience made her a firm advocate of exploring your own path. I felt education was meant to provide opportunities, but in this case, it actually got in the way. That's something I really push to people now. I have a degree and I was a studious teenager. But if you're doing your own thing as well, it can be worth choosing a more flexible approach. Lily did her astronomy and planetary science degree with the Open University, remaining at home with her parents in Preston for the duration of her 6-year part-time course. While working towards her degree, she kept blogging, enjoying press trips around Europe, and also took up modelling. A strange world where she met some good friends. At the age of 21, however, Lily took stock of her career and life. Early in 2019, I had this light bulb moment. If I was making money from designing when I was 13, why not now? Creating the Lily Kate Makes Instagram account, Lily threw herself into building a community. A few patterns had come out when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and suddenly travel blogging and modelling were off the menu. Lockdown brought the make, do and mend ethos to the fore, and Lily continued with her Open University studies and threw herself into designing patterns. It went from pocket money to a small but full-time wage, equivalent for a 23-year-old overnight, she says. 5 years on from COVID, and Lily's Knitstagram community lap up every new release. And thanks to her career so far, Lily last year took the step of moving into a dream property. My parents are still living in Preston. My brother is not too far away from them, and my nan is in Kirkham. I feel like there's pressure to move away, but I'm very fortunate my parents supported me through everything. She is now just 20 minutes from her mum and dad, who she's very close to. In 2013, I was out for a drive and found a road that looked really old with Victorian lampposts. Every house was different, says Lily. In a dedication to a project which Lily is no stranger to, she set up a right move alert for the postcode and made buying a property on that street her goal. The house had been home to an old lady who sadly passed away the year before when she was 95, and it still had her furniture and knickknacks. I absolutely loved it, and the garden was huge. I knew it was going to take a lot of work, but I fell in love with it. Lily shares every step on Lily Kate Makes and has found her traditionally crafty fans loved the process. There's a lot of overlap, it turns out, between knitters and gardeners and knitters and people who like interiors. With her patterns booming and her home a work in progress, she reflects, I went through a breakup at the beginning of last year. I've decided to fully focus on myself now he's out of the way. I've met a lot of new people, but it can be a tricky one to get the balance right sometimes. There's my online self, Lily Kate Makes, with the knitting and the cottage and everything. But I'm also just someone in my 20s who goes out to meet friends and goes to the gym. I would have always considered myself to be an extrovert, as in someone who gets their energy from being around other people. But since living alone, I'm getting used to spending a lot of time in my own company.
And our next article is The Long Way Home. Award-winning author Jen Ashworth on how tackling Wainwright's coast-to-coast walk reveals so much more to her than how to traverse the land. Burnt out and longing for an escape, Jen Ashworth emerged from lockdown with a compulsive need to walk and to walk away. Armed with little more than the knowledge imparted by a 2-day orienteering course and a set of maps, she embarked on one of the most epic of English walks, Wainwright's Coast to Coast. guided not just by Wainwright's writing, but also by daily letters from her friend Clive, someone facing an epic journey of his own. Jen's pilgrimage soon became more than just walking. It became a chance to examine, engage and connect with what it means to care for others and for oneself. But the walk's tricky terrain was not the only thing standing in Jen's way. As the days went by, her balance began to fail her, and the act of putting one foot in front of the other became a new exercise in caution. When a vicious heatwave forced her to pause her expedition, giving her an opportunity to investigate the new limitations of her body, Jen was confronted with a life-altering brain tumour diagnosis and a new path of self-discovery. I first became aware of some minor but troubling symptoms on the walk itself. Problems with balance, changes to my hearing and tinnitus, Jen explains. A hearing test confirmed to me that I'd lost a lot of hearing, and scans confirmed that I had a tumour and that I would need surgery. It was a real shock to have relatively minor symptoms easily ignored, and only the space and calm I experienced on the walk gave me the time to listen to my body and realise something wasn't quite right. I remember when I was diagnosed, my doctor saying that the best physio I could do was walking on uneven ground, and I thought, gosh, my body knew that. Now fully recovered, apart from hearing loss and some enduring problems with balance, Preston-born Jen leads a healthy, normal life. Her new memoir, The Parallel Path, Love, Grit and Walking the North, tells her story. It's a story about journeys and edgelands moving from one place to another. It's as much a story of walking across the country as Jen records her 2-week solo trek from St. Bees Head to Robin Hood's Bay, as it is an exploration of moving from childhood to adulthood, between health and sickness, from being a carer to being cared for. It's about a hardness softening, a willingness to bend, but also a lesson in learning to accept that some parts of us stay the same. It's about circling home. I'm not a marathon runner, I'm not a super outdoorsy person, and there's not a sense that I was trying to share myself as someone heroic, Jen said. It wasn't about conquering nature or conquering my own body. I wasn't Charles Atlas. And so the walk was very slow, very tentative. There was lots of getting lost, and the thinking was like that too. There was a lot of remembering. In The Parallel Path, Jen reflects on Wainwright's own writing about the walk. He says, the way you walk is the way you live. You've got to have an aim, and you've got to have purpose. And I thought, oh, that's not how I feel. I feel aimless and wandering and drifting. Jen asked herself, what would a book that captured the feeling look like? And the end result was something beautiful that celebrates an acceptance of the world, as it is an acceptance of ourselves. A professor of writing at Lancaster University, Jen is also the author of 5 novels, another memoir and many short stories and essays. All 5 of those novels are set in Lancashire, and they, like The Parallel Path, capture something unique about the county, whilst offering something decisively different and original in the storyline. Where that begins is thinking about home, and Lancashire is my home, says Jen. I didn't begin with wanting to capture the truth about Lancashire because it's such a varied place, but with this really powerful interest in what it is to be at home, or to feel not at home. In the early days of her writing career, London-based publishers would describe Jen's work as being distinctly Lancastrian, which she came to understand over time. I think they mean something about the sense of humour across all my novels, the dark comedy and a lack of sentimentality as well, she says. And my memoirs can be quite bleak. In all my books there's a real interest in tenderness, but I'm not interested in saccharine or melodrama, or wrenching things into happy endings. My work has often been described with words like toughness, hardness, grittiness, or unflinching. Aware of how others, particularly outside of Lancashire, perceived Jen and her work when she set out to write The Parallel Path, she did so examining those ideas more closely. It became a way of figuring out what those things mean, she says. What is it when we say someone's tough or gritty or hard or unsentimental? What's actually going on there? Because I know myself to be more complicated than that. And I know the people that I work with and live with here in Lancashire to be more complicated than that. In The Parallel Path, Jen offers us a beautiful portrayal of the complexity of people with all the nuance of life and explores the relationships we have with the places we inhabit and visit. The book is written in a style that feels patient. The reader is invited to meander just as Jen does during her walk, getting lost, both on footpaths and in thought, revisiting profound moments from her life as they feel relevant to the challenges of the walk. On the page, Jen, now living in Lancaster, is self-deprecating and self-aware. She's sometimes grumpy and often funny. Jen tells her story with great care. A particularly moving element of the memoir are the letters Jen receives each day she arrives at her lodgings for the night. They are written and sent to her by her friend Clive Parkinson, an artist and filmmaker who is living with incurable cancer. She says, "I imagine I would be the friend and the listener, the well person who was listening to what someone who was sick wanted to say and wanted to process. And I'm glad that's not what's happened, because what actually happened, and it became fairly obvious early on in the walk, was that Clive was trying to look after me. He was trying to give me something. He was trying to care for me." Jen had decided to undertake the walk shortly after lockdown. She was burned out and felt a powerful urge to walk away. During lockdown, she'd cared for her children and her students, and she suddenly needed to be alone. "I felt at the beginning that other people were the problem," Jen says, but Clive's letters and the reflective journey she undertook changed that. "In this walk, I'd imagined it as, I'm going to please myself, I'm going to do what I want. No one was going to bother me. But every day, Clive offered me something that I didn't expect, and it was almost like, here's the agenda for what you will think about today." Clive sent letters, cutouts from old pamphlets, pieces of art, sketches and stories from his own walks, his life, his learnings. What neither Jen nor Clive knew at the time was that Jen would soon become seriously ill. However, Clive's letters illuminated something for Jen that she hadn't previously understood: her resistance to being cared for. Thinking back to how Clive's letters enabled Jen to explore her relationship with the idea of care, she says, "It felt like such a magical period where he was almost teaching me who I would need to be in order to be ill." Reflecting on the physical and mental challenge of walking Wainwright's coast to coast, the emerging personal revelations along the way, and life-changing illness, Jen explains in the book how she came to understand there are different parts of a person and how those different parts process change and grief at different paces. She also considers that whilst we can grow, we may need to accept that some parts of ourselves are here to stay. Jen writes, "Changed but not cured, some things won't be fixed. An instinctive refusal to be helped. A tendency to say something doesn't hurt when it does. All of that is still with me. I just have some other things now too." Similarly, when talking about how her novels differ greatly in terms of subject matter, Jen says she is lots of versions of herself when she writes. "I'm not trying to be coherent. I write what feels most urgent." As a novelist, Jen always begins with a question about a character. In her latest novel, Ghosted, shortlisted for the Portico Prize, she asked, "Why would a woman wait several weeks to report her husband missing? And what would others make of that? what would the police conclude? The novel then proceeds to answer that question, revealing the character's motivations and, of course, what really happened. Jen's work in fiction is largely focused on exploring character, why people are who they are, and what they do. In her memoir, The Parallel Path, she is, to use a word she's been described with before, unflinching in asking these questions of herself and considering the things which matter most to her. On motherhood and writing about her children, Jen says, "It was one of the hardest things about writing this book, and I will say that I can't write about what it is to be me without writing about what it is to be a mother." The Parallel Path is an absorbing book about one woman's journey. However, many women, and men no doubt, will find they relate to her experiences. From parenthood to balancing the demands of a busy career, relationships, loss, and traversing the landscape of grief, it is an honest, open account of life as it happens, with all the emotion, humour, and surprises that come along the way. A healthy dose of nature writing and local insight make it all the more special for those who want to walk and love the land. As well as continuing to teach at Lancaster University, which Jem finds enormously rewarding, saying, "There's a community here that's so nourishing to me," she's working on a new novel. She describes it as a big story about a large family set across different parts of Lancashire, travelling through the eras from the 70s until the present day. The book will take a while, she explains. So what's next? A 5-part radio series set in the near future in Morecambe, a sort of ghost story, she says. The programme airs on BBC Radio 4 this February, and in the meantime you can buy all of Jen's books in your local bookshop or online.
At this time of year, it's natural to look ahead to spring, and no exception is Lancashire Wildlife Trust's Alan Wright, who's looking ahead to a spring spectacle in his latest report for Lancashire Life. It's entitled A Spring Spectacle. There is a moment every year when I realise winter is over. It isn't a change in the weather or the blooms of a certain flower that signifies it for me. It is the moment the sand martins return to Brockholes. All of a sudden, the Meadow Lake and Number 1 Pit come to life with acrobatic small birds darting along the water, creating displays for people on the visitor village. These tiny birds, just 4.5 inches long and weighing 14 grams, about the same as an empty aluminium pop can, will have just made a remarkable journey back from Africa. The sand martins will have been holidaying in Senegal, Mali, Ghana, Algeria and Tunisia before spending several weeks in flight, covering 4,000 miles back to Lancashire. While their swallow cousins nest in old barns and disused buildings, and house martins have to search further afield to find wooden eaves, sand martins stick to what they know is best: good old sandy banks on the Ribble, or our man-made nesting colonies on islands at the nature reserve just off the M6 motorway at Samlesbury. They will dig tunnels that can be up to 3 feet in length, with a chamber at the end where the bird will lay 4 or 5 eggs on a bed of collected straw and feathers. The sand martin is our smallest swallow, brown above and white below, with a brown band across its breast and a short forked tail. Its colonies can be found on rivers, lakes and flooded gravel pits all around the UK. They will buzz around the lakes at Brockholes, catching flying insects, aphids and beetles that are abundant in summer, and taking them back to their nests or their high-rise boxes, which we have created. It is always interesting to try to guess which of the birds are sand martins and which are swallows hunting over the water at Brockholes. In fact, you might be lucky and see them joined by one of Britain's smallest birds of prey, the hobby. Hobbies are really keen on dragonflies and damselflies. Sand martins like a get-together and are sociable birds, nesting in colonies in summer and roosting in large numbers in autumn. They fly back to Africa to spend the winter. But let's not think about that yet. While the sand martins are around, the weather will be warm, I won't say dry, and it will lift our spirits. Popping into Brockles for tea and cake by the meadow lake is, I find, the perfect place to spend a warm spring day where I can be treated to a natural air display that takes my breath away.
We now explore the magical art of making things. Industry and art come together at a historic Lancashire company with a unique blend of heritage and creativity. Deep inside the industrial heartland of Lancashire lies a business with a magical secret. Just off the main road through Darwen town centre sits the former Victorian tram shed where, centuries ago, trams were skillfully repaired and maintained ready to serve the county. Step through those same doors today, the home of Ritherden and Company since 1947, and there is something rather unusual on the shop floor. It may have all the expected machinery and engineering paraphernalia that goes with a company that has been inventing and making things since 1895. But look beyond the welding sparks, enormous fabrication machines and pallets laden with PVC cabinets, and you'll soon spot something different, because Ritherden is different. Company founder Percy Ritherden originally set up the business in Bolton in 1895, welding parts of penny farthing bicycles and producing electroplated products. But Percy was also an amateur magician with a secret workshop at the back of the factory where he made props for fellow magicians, including Chung Ling Soo, the internationally renowned performer who appeared in music halls and theatres around the world. And now, more than 130 years later, magic is still being made at Ritherden. Stationed at one of the factory assembly benches, someone is delicately working on a small, solid figurine of a person sitting behind an office desk. That someone is acclaimed Lancashire-based artist Nicola Ellis, and the figure in the eye-catching sculpture is Ben Ritherden, the fourth generation of his family to run the business. Nicola has the unusual role of artist in residence at the company, where for the past 7 years she has turned her creative talents to producing unique artworks from Ritherden's waste materials, often inverting the masterful processes to blend art with industry. There's an element of magic involved in what I do, explains Nicola, in a nod to Ritherden's intriguing magical past. It was luck, she said, that led her to becoming Ritherden's artist in residence. I mentioned to an art curator in London about my work, who then told me about an art residency at a factory. The project was run as part of Festival of Making in Blackburn. The curator told the festival organiser I could do it, and next thing I knew, I was at Ritherden. That was 2018, and now they can't get rid of me. I love it here. My dad, back home in St Helens, had always worked making things in factories, and I found the manufacturing side so fascinating. I started to work with bits of steel, trying to figure out more about the processes for steel manufacturing, like welding, which is standardised and has a lot of rules around it. I wanted to understand how to use that process properly, and then I decided to give fabrication a go in my own way, messing with a tried and tested process to see what I could make happen. Nicola finds the blend of history and innovation inspiring and interprets this through her sculptures and artworks. There is something mystical and magical about the processes and materials, what can be done with them, just like in the past when Percy made his magic props. It is Ritherden's intriguing history and her lifelong fascination with industrial production that inspires Nicola's work, and it has led to her pieces being displayed in galleries, including Manchester Art Gallery, the Arts Council National Collection, and the Government Art Collection have also acquired pieces of Nicola's work produced at Ritherden. I was thrilled when Manchester Art Gallery acquired one of the pieces I produced at Ritherden, she says. The engineer's side of my brain would describe it as a piece of waste metal with scrap powder on it, but it is much more than that. I have an accidental understanding of industry and machines. The factory is not a studio, but it is where I should be. It works well with the team here. That is testament to everyone's interest and curiosity. I have been allowed to use the factory paint shop on a Friday afternoon as a kind of studio time, so I began experimenting with ways to use powder coating as more of a material. Instead of just spraying it on, I looked at the way it should be done and then did everything back to front, throwing the paint on, layering it on, letting it bake, and then it comes out full of drips. This relationship between the artist and a long-standing, well-respected business is made possible through funding from the Pan-European Better Factory project, allowing Nicola to continue her work at Ritherden. As technology, innovations and efficiencies, particularly around waste materials, evolve at Ritherden, Nicola is never short of new sources of inspiration. Ben Ritherden explains, working with Nicola is completely different from anything we normally do. She will often come up with ideas for artwork that means we have to completely rethink our usual approach. Nicola will use the same materials as our fabricators, but in a different way. For example, she will take a huge panel that would normally be powder coated to a perfect finish, but instead creates a finish full of drips and in different colours. It's all very striking. It is stimulating and great fun. It takes away from the usual routine and produce products we normally make to create something in a totally different way. Working with Nicola over the past 7 years, I often think about what it must have been like back in the earlier days when we'd be sending our magic props to some other part of the world. We still have letters from Chung Ling Soo asking Ritherden to make a cannon trick and a disappearing cabinet to ship out to Australia, where he was performing during a world tour. Now, when we are working with Nicola, she will be producing one of her big projects, a stunning work of art sculpture that will be shipped out to a gallery somewhere. It's exciting and astonishing what she creates. Coinciding with Ritherden's 130th birthday, Nicola's latest work is leaving the factory in Darwin in readiness for the exhibition of her art at Manchester Home Venue, opening at the end of February. One of the more unusual pieces to be shown is a Roman-style bust of a long-standing company employee, Jan Sorstwick, who retired from Ritherden's assembly department earlier this year. This was certainly a very different way to capture one of our team, says Ben. And we will be visiting the exhibition. Nicola has worked with us for many years and she's definitely seen as one of the team. We really enjoy her being around the factory. And that concludes our reading of the February issue of Lancashire Life. We look forward to reading to you again next month, and it's goodbye from myself, Kathryn, and Rick and Wendy.